Season 2 of the Behind the Mask podcast is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Here at Behind the Mask, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original storytellers and custodians of the land on which we live and meet today. Behind the Mask is a podcast about sharing authentic stories. And in continuing that legacy of storytelling, we acknowledge that we're honouring and celebrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' traditions, customs and stories. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
What I am noticing kind of working in that same sort of model a little bit now, back when I first entered into the fitness industry, it was that this new method of training really came onto the market, and it was like 45 minutes, don't have to think, just come in, flog yourself, but then also maybe not training to your hormones as a woman and things like that. And to be honest, even as a woman, it wasn't something that I was even educated on. And tell you, like, I've only just really learnt that over the last 5 years, and I'm still figuring it out.
The main issue that I see with social media is that, the way that we use it and interact with it is sort of governed by the algorithm, and the algorithm's main objective is to capture your attention. Like Facebook at the moment doesn't want you to leave Facebook. But if it was incentivized in a different way, then maybe it would become more like a meet and greet site where you could actually have people have conversations and then go and meet up outside in the real world. What is the most impactful event that has occurred to you? It
was my dad passing away, and when you just watch the soul and the life of somebody just literally exit their body and then go from being your pillar of strength, a big tough man who you call your dad, to literally a bag of bones, a skeleton, you can't ever turn a blind eye to that.
The gym, in a way, for a lot of people has taken over from religion, in that there's an established set of rules. There's a sort of semi-hierarchy. There's leaders, there's this community that you can go to.
I'm Josh Pitterman, and welcome to Season 2 of the Behind the Mask podcast. This show is about our diverse and extraordinary guests whose authentic stories have challenged them and changed them. They'll share the tools and wisdoms they use to find purpose, bliss, and a greater sense of meaning to their lives. And together, we'll unpack and ponder some of the more pressing and existential issues facing our society. Get ready to be inspired by the depths of the human experience. It's time to go behind the mask. We all want to look and feel our best, but health and fitness can be an incredibly overwhelming space for some people, and confusing as well, especially with the breadth of information and advice that is out there on social media. So how can we best navigate our way through the wild west of wellness, and how can we create a more positive relationship with health and fitness, one that promotes sustainability, vitality, longevity, and above all, fun? It's time to go behind the mask of health and fitness. And I'm joined in the Roland Media studio today by two epic humans in this space: personal trainer and lifestyle coach, Duncan McDaide, and gym owner, trainer, breathwork and meditation facilitator, and co-host of both Yokayi Footy and the Rushing Slowly podcast, Megan Waters. Megsy, Dunk, welcome to the Behind the Mask podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
We're going to cover or uncover so much on this episode, but I don't proclaim to feel like we'll uncover everything, because it's just so much.
Such a big topic.
Huge topic.
Yeah.
But in the process of uncovering, I invite you guys to uncover some of your own personal stories and to take off your own masks. So let's get cracking. As really highly qualified and experienced individuals in this space, what effect do you feel social media is having on people's relationship with their health and fitness?
Big question. There's 2 hours right there.
Yeah,
we can cut this into 2 episodes.
Heavy ones.
We don't stuff around straight away. Yeah.
I have a very interesting relationship with social media for that exact reason, and I often think to myself, as a woman in my mid-30s, I have a level of self-awareness that enables me to control my usage and relationship with it somewhat. But I'm also constantly catching myself out when it comes to things like comparison or just going down that wormhole of just procrastinating and spending so much time mindlessly scrolling. And I think, gosh, if I have a level of self-awareness and I have a relatively, clear mind when it comes to things like that, I worry so much about people that don't, the younger generation. It's a funny thing because it really has such a purpose, and social media is so great for so many things. But yeah, it can also be so detrimental, and especially when it comes to things like comparison and, looking at somebody else's life or looking at somebody else's body, especially when it comes to fitness and health and wellness. It can be quite a scary place to navigate for the mind when you catch yourself in that loop of comparison and just spending way too much time on it.
Yeah. I think the main issue that I see with social media is that, the way that we use it and interact with it is sort of governed by the algorithm, and the algorithm's main objective is to capture your attention. And that's the way that the whole system's set up. Whereas if you could change the incentive for the company, because at the moment, if the way that those companies make money is through advertising. And so the advertisers need our attention in order to get that advert. But if you could monetize it in a different way, if we had to pay a subscription, even if it was just a small one, then you change the incentive, you change the algorithm, and it's not so sensationalized, it's not so attention grabbing. And maybe you could put stuff in it, like Facebook at the moment doesn't want you to leave Facebook. But if it was incentivized in a different way, then maybe it would become more like a meet and greet site where you could actually have people have conversations and then go and meet up outside in the real world. But at the moment, so many of those companies are sort of incentivized to capture and keep your attention that it's very difficult because it's working on our own design mechanisms, dopamine levels, triggering stuff that we don't have a lot of control over. Actually, like they'd have you believe that it's very much an individual responsibility problem. It's your issue if you're using too much Facebook or Instagram. But actually, they're triggering things that is subconscious to us that we are not even aware of. And so I think that is the most harmful part of it. Although, as you say, there's such a wonderful side to social media. It brings about this very thing that we're doing today. And so I don't want to eradicate it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. But I do think that if you were to be able to change that incentive for it, I think you'd see a dramatic change in the way that people use it.
And I've had to myself implement boundaries with the way that I use it because I know that algorithm gets me.
Yeah.
It gets me every time.
It's
and
everyone.
I am constantly finding myself so much, like habitually now, just picking it up, jumping on and scrolling. So now I limit the only app that I have on my phone in terms of social media is Instagram. I don't have Facebook anymore. I don't have TikTok. I simply can't have those things because then it's like not only am I wasting however many hours on this app, then I'm doing it on the others.
Yep.
So I'm really conscious that I remove myself from those other apps to ensure that I don't waste any more time than I need to. But I've had to really put boundaries in place because of it because, yeah, it's really got me.
It just consumes you. And I think we were talking before, there's a book by a guy called Johann Hari called Stolen Focus. And because of the way that we're consuming, he mentions the stuff that I talked about earlier, but also one of the things that he found was that think about 100 years ago, the way that we consumed information. You got a newspaper, you read a couple of articles. That was it. You had conversation, and then 50 years ago, TV came and you had advertising and, but you'd probably only watch, I don't know, a couple of shows a week maybe. And now in the space of half an hour, I've seen 100 adverts as I scroll through the reels. And it was something like 5 or 50,000 bits of advertising that we see now throughout the day. Because you think about it, all of us have got labels on everywhere you drive, everywhere you go. Even these microphones have got their branding on them. And it leads to this really distracted, disorientated mind where you can't concentrate on any one task at any time. And I think people get lost in the idea that they're multitasking. And the thing that he explores in the book is actually multitasking is a fallacy. It's not possible for the brain to go from one task to the next and then back again. It takes it, a few minutes to assimilate back into that task. So if you've got, a web browser with 10 different toggles on and you're going in between the two, you're actually not like driving yourself forwards at all. I think it's a really interesting conversation. It's interesting for us being millennials, having grown up without it, and whether the perspective that you're talking about is because you knew of a time before this was a thing and you're exactly. And so my concern is for people that, are growing up now that don't have that perspective. And the tech companies are aware. Like you've got Instagram now that are putting limits on youths. So there's like a teenage program.
Yeah, they've just brought that out.
Yeah, and the government's talking about doing this, enforcing that for all social media.
Yep, we had some politicians on the show recently, and one of them was a part of the social media sort of conglomerate of politicians from multiple parties coming up with ideas to change legislation around social media. And they said the EU has been really forward in some ideas, and they're not as, you call them crazy ideas, but there is a look at legislation. But back to the fitness part of it and the health and fitness part of it. You talked about extremity, Dunk, and you talked about comparison, Megsy.
Yeah.
I think there's something in that we are comparing ourselves to the extremes.
Yeah.
And
100%.
And what does that do? And I guess what I'm
uninitiated, the untrained.
That's what I was just about to say.
The people that haven't done courses, that don't have the hours in the gym, are giving out advice.
Tell me about that. I want to know.
That was a big part of why I shut down my TikTok, because I was just seeing so many, from a female perspective, so many grow your booty in 10 days doing this Pilates move upside down on the wall kind of thing. Just stuff that's crazy. And I'm like, are people actually buying into these kinds of things?
What were the likes and comments and reach? Was it high?
Yeah. And that's why I'm like,
because the algorithm triggers sensationalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's extremity.
Yeah.
So you see, I want to know, I'll say my opinion at some other point, but I want to know what sort of misinformation, other than that one, from social media fitness influencers who are not credentialed, what sort of information has pissed you off the most? Speaking of extremity.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. I want to hear it.
Here we go.
I think there's a lot of, I think especially when it comes to nutrition, I often get pretty frustrated sometimes when I see nutrition advice being dished out to people in the masses without actually knowing a person's biology and without actually knowing a person's the ins and outs of a person. And so a lot of it's very general, like calorie counting and this is what you should be. But I believe that kind of thing is very specific to an individual, and a lot of the calorie deficit chat. And look, I get it, but I just think when you're speaking to such a wide audience, and a lot of the people that you're speaking to really aren't that educated. They're just wanting information, and it's just very broad. And I believe that if you're wanting to lose weight or go, or if you're just wanting some guidance with nutrition and health coaching, that you should be maybe exploring a one-on-one approach versus listening to somebody who's just shooting information out at you that's very general. That's always, I think nutrition's a big thing for me. I get really kind of, it annoys me a little bit when I see a lot of nutritional information out there, and there's just so much of it, and you listen to one person say say something, and then another person say something completely different, and it's so confusing. And that's why I've actually just gone on a bit of a journey with a health coach myself, Christina. She's amazing, and we did a bit of a gut health protocol, and it was all related to my bloods. I really did it properly, and I'm so glad I did it that way. Well, I actually want to freeze my eggs. So that's kind of the main reason I wanted to make sure that my hormones are in a really good place and just
Great idea.
Just get my gut health in a really good position, basically.
And also
hormones.
love that you're doing that. I always think that's really beautiful and brave when people speak about that.
Yeah, I think, well, I eventually when I have kids one day, I'm in my mid-30s and I'm not in a position to kind of do that now. So I think it's
so
just
smart. Sorry to interrupt, but I have friends who reached later in life and wish that they'd been told this information.
Yeah.
So I think it's and one of the things that she said was that actually like she feels a bit resentful towards the government or education entities that this isn't information that's out there that actually once you get to a certain age, you should be freezing your eggs and getting yourself into as healthy a position as possible and then freezing them so that you have the opportunity to do this later. And it's so much easier if you've done that, if you've made those steps.
And it takes the pressure off as a woman as well. It's like this thing, it's a funny thing for me because it feels like time is ticking, but I'm personally not in a rush in that sense. Like,
No, totally.
however, my biological clock, every time you have a period every month, more that the way that it works is that you lose, more opportunities. So that was the reason for me. And there are multiple other reasons for people to want to follow a food plan or go on a diet or whatever. And I just feel like that it should be something that's very specific to the individual versus it being such a broad follow this person on Instagram and do exactly what they're doing. And for sure, I think that there are a lot of people that you might find that are similar to you. So it makes sense to follow that. But I'm sort of speaking to the more broad people that have like mass followings that don't have the credentials or education and they're just spilling out that,
But what they do have,
liver.
and this is what shits me, is a great perky peachy tush and abs
Yeah.
and some really good lighting.
Yeah.
Like they've got a great ring light going
Yeah.
there. They've got someone who's always shooting their content beautifully.
Videographer.
They look gorge, and because they look a certain way and we feel that health and fitness is something that is extrinsically focused,
Yeah.
we buy into, the masses buy into the bullshit of gross generalizations. That you do, like the subconscious thing here is you do this and you'll have my abs and ass and lighting.
Well, the big one was the Liver King, wasn't it? Do you guys know who that is? You know who the Liver King is? So he had a couple of million people on as followers, and his big thing was this ancestral sort of eat raw liver testicles, da-da-da-da-da.
And that's how he got so jacked.
And that's how he got so jacked, and he can look like him. And then it came out that he was on thousands of dollars of steroids every month. And you're like, well, I mean, you could have been eating McDonald's every day. Like it wouldn't have mattered. You're still going to look that way, and no one eating your supplements. And he has like $100 million a year supplement business.
Wow.
Selling. Yeah.
That's annoying.
It was. Yeah.
That shut you?
Very, very. That very much frustrated me because he misled. Like eating offal and organic produce is a great thing.
Yes.
Like the most nutrient dense meats that you can get. You don't need to eat them raw, but selling it in that manner, the morals behind that, is just, I think, unconscionable. And to have affected that many people and just monetized it in that way, I thoroughly dislike that. And it builds out to anybody really taking anabolics or steroids and not being honest about it. I don't mind if you want to take it. But be honest about how you got the physique that you got, because it's cheating. Like you've just taken the limitless drug. You can sleep for 5 hours a night. You can train twice a day. You can have the odd cheat meal every day, and you're still going to get a far superior set of results. You've still got to train. You've still got to eat relatively good foods. Like I'm not taking that apart, but like as a dad who gets 6 hours of broken sleep a night and then struggles to train 3 times a week. Like I'm looking at this guy who's, smashing it down, and getting incredible results, and it can be disheartening for even someone like me who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So for the regular person, it can stop people in their tracks before they've even got going, or it makes you believe in their methodology, and their methodology would have worked regardless of what they did because they're on performance-enhancing drugs.
And training 12 times a week.
Yeah. And recovering from that, because I can train 12 times a week, but I won't recover from it.
Exactly.
And that's the thing with social media, though. Maybe comparison isn't the right word, but it's just having an awareness and reminding yourself and being very conscious all the time that, okay, yes, we consume and there are massive elements of it that I do really enjoy, but you always have to remind yourself that we see the smallest slither of a person's life or what is real or what, like, you literally don't know what's going on behind the mask of social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to be conscious of that.
And it's so hard when, going back to what we were talking about at the start, is when the dopamine rush that you're getting brings you into the addictive components of it. It's so hard for the thinking mind to separate itself from the awareness that gets to view that thinking mind. And we're just in the spiral of the thinking mind and comparison and fear and excitement and all the things that go on and permeate through that thinking mind are just running as we go scroll down. We don't have that capacity to be discerning, to have the space, to have that awareness to go, you know what? I wonder what her backstory is behind that peachy tush. Yeah. And you know what? She may work out a lot. I didn't say that when I mentioned that. She may work out lots and lots and lots, and she may eat beautifully or eat really healthily and have a 90-10 split of clean eating and calorie deficit or whatever. But she is also sharing something that may be, no matter whether you do exactly what she's done, impossible for you to achieve just based on genetics, bone structure,
100%,
all sorts of stuff. Hey, the stuff about the steroids, Braden, our producer here, obviously scrolls through a number of interesting health and fitness things, but he got me onto these dudes called the Tren Twins. And the Tren Twins have 1.3 million followers, and they're not like the liver dude. They're just celebrating the fact that
They do steroids?
They're smashing test.
Oh my God, what?
And 210 milligrams a week. And so it's moved to this other part and where it's like, liver guy's hiding it. But there's people out there now that are going, you know what? Screw hiding it, fuck it. I'm just going to celebrate this. And what is that doing to young kids? It's buying into, social media brings the immediacy of, just the entitlement. I deserve that many likes, and I deserve that many followers, and I need to look hot immediately. And you know what? Test. And no one is thinking about what that could do to their bodies.
It's petrifying what is happening in the world of the World Wide Web. It is just a scary, scary place. And then you think about all this AI stuff, and then that's like a whole nother beast that I don't even fully understand. But
I'm excited.
I'm so glad. I want to go back to those days like you talked about before. Like,
what did they look like for you?
I grew up in Darwin, and growing up without a phone, I was outside. I was playing sport. I was like in nature. I was running amok. Like, I missed that. And
how do we get back?
How do you
get back? Given that we're not going to be able to put the genie back in a bottle, like, what would you do to bring us back?
We didn't rub it the right way, did we? I had to have a Chrissy. So just on a side note, because we're going to get to Megsy, I ordered a martini the other week, and I asked for, can you give me Christina Aguilera level of dirty? And the guy was like, what? He was obviously like super Gen Z. I'm like, come on, like, give me like, and I had to get to the point where I was like, gonna get rowdy. And he's like, nah. And I was like, start dropping and everything's still nothing. Nothing. But like,
audience,
and I don't often, and Duncan's learnt that about me from owning a gym together. I don't often know my audience. And I'll just still do the version of me.
There's nothing worse than when you like have to explain your joke. Or like, there's like.
But I explained it through song. I explained it through the art form of dance. And it's still, no. They enjoyed it. And it was a really filthy, really nice martini. Anyway,
We digress.
We digress. That's a podcast. Bring it back to the tree trunk. So what are those things for you? What does it look like?
Well, yeah, speaking of tree trunks, that was my life. Like growing up, literally climbing trees, outside, no shoes, so much connection. Like,
is that what you do now, though? Do you get back to that? Like, how do you get back to it?
I don't get back to it as much as I would like because, we're in the rat race of trying to live and work and survive and make money and all that kind of stuff. And that is probably 90%, which is way too much. And I really miss that. The simple life. Take me back to the simple life. And how do we get there? I think it's just making conscious effort. I mean, things like breathwork practices, meditation, being in nature. I'm really lucky that I live by the ocean, and when the sun's out, I'm very conscious of making sure I get outside as much as I can and just like a lizard, like I'm in the sun, like a solar panel. And if I can recharging like that kind of thing. If there's little pockets of the day that I can, take myself out and have those little moments away from the distraction of a phone and technology, I'll always do that. And that's, I guess, something that you could do in the day to day. But in terms of the bigger scale and the bigger picture, and especially when I think about kids nowadays, us growing up versus the way that they grow up now, I actually have no idea how can they access what we used to have, what we used to do. I don't know if that's even possible anymore because I see it. One of my cousins, she's got lots of kids. She's got 13 little bubbers.
13.
She's at 13.
That's brave.
Our little tribe.
Yeah,
our Christmas is always fun.
Super religious?
No, just lots of babies.
Just busy.
Yeah, just got busy. They're the best kids. They're the most beautiful. They're like our Christmas at home is just always so fun and so busy. But, I often see these kids now and they're all on their phones. Like everyone's always like TikTok is massive. And I'm just like, fuck, I'm so glad I didn't have that when I was a teenager or a kid.
Yeah. So I've got 4.
You got 4?
I thought 13. I thought I was doing all right with 4, but 13 definitely trumps that. Super religious. So I ponder this very thing, right? How can I? 8's the oldest.
Yeah.
1's the youngest. And it's hard. It's really hard. We don't let them have screens at this stage. They watch a movie on the weekend, but that's about it. But how do you give them that freedom? And it's going to take a shift in society's thinking. Like we're actually moving into the sort of more suburbia country up New South Wales way because we want this very thing for them. We live in a society that's got the least amount of disease in history, that's the safest in history. You're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to have a child be snatched from you. But we don't let them go out in the world and explore it. I was back in England recently and there was a big hoo-ha because this mother had let her 13-year-old son go over to France on holiday with his 13-year-old friend and she got pilloried for it. And I thought that's really sad because what a great experience for him. Like child dependent, if he's a mature young man, like why not? Like why wouldn't you let him? The world's a much smaller place than it was when we were growing up, and that's a great way of like letting him go out and explore it. And I struggled to see the problem with it. He'd have a mobile phone, he'd have a credit card, you could be there in less than a day. Like, there's not a lot of problems. On the cost benefit analysis, there's so many more benefits. So I think you touched on it earlier when you said you were making conscious decisions. And I feel like in today's society, there's a lot of people that are asleep at the wheel and unconscious in everything that they're doing, right? The rat race. Why are you working so hard? Like, to what end? What is it that you gain? Because, like past earning a family income of about 100 grand a year, there's no increase in happiness past that point. So if the ultimate goal is to try and sort of live the best life, then, once you get up and you can pay all your bills, et cetera, I don't want to sort of blanket that responsibility because, I know that anybody living below that line is doing it tough. But up and past that point, like bringing that awareness into your life, I think that's the key to bringing it back to where we grew up, that age that we grew up in, because again, you mentioned it again with your own social media content using is just, I don't mind social media. I'm sure we'll get onto it later, but I actually don't mind the like ego training and like living your life a little bit through ego, but like with awareness, like be aware of how the ego is affecting you and when it is that you're utilizing it for your best self. When we first opened the gym, I went through a whole phase where I was like, all right, I'm going to try and live consciously. I'm not going to train because of my ego, because for so long I'd trained to look good. And I thought that was maybe a bad thing, that like actually I just needed to get more intrinsic sets of values around my training. And so like I did that, and I ended up not training at all because I just didn't, I stopped pushing myself. I stopped enjoying it. I stopped seeing any results. And it's gradually over about a 6-month period, I just stopped training regularly.
Did you feel like you didn't have a strong set of intrinsic values that were worth training for?
I guess so. Like I was just, I was really trying to go and, like, do I feel like training today? Like what's training going to bring me versus what am I missing out on by taking this time away from my family? And there was just a lot more pull to go in other directions. And it probably wasn't an overall bad thing for that time in my life. But eventually I was like, I think I need my ego. Yeah. I think I just need to try and look good.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Can it be just a balance of those things?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Because now at least I've explored that and I understand why it is that I'm doing those things. I understand the motivating factors behind what my training, and I can use it to my benefit, because again, on the cost benefit ratio, like it benefits me far more to be training.
Yeah.
And I've never been a big one for, doing stupid amounts of training during the week anyway, but like I did enough to stay healthy and fit and physically active. But yeah, it's just that conscious awareness to any decision that you make, I think, is going to bring us to a better overall place and stops you from spending all your time on social media or allowing your children to do that.
And how do you make or assess yourself making a conscious decision? Like, is it?
I think a conscious decision is just that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so much of what we do is we get told to go to school. You're then told the next pathway is probably university. If it's not university, maybe it's some sort of apprenticeship, and you sort of have some awareness then and you're starting to think about things, but then you've made that decision and it's kind of just set and forget. Family, kids, that's the pathway. And before you know it, you're 40 and I don't know how I got here.
Yep.
And, drive, it's sort of it's similar in a way to driving.
It's autopilot.
It's autopilot,
So you're asking, the conscious decisions are ones that are based on reflection and critical thinking.
Reflection, massive.
You need both of them. You need to question what you're doing. You need to reflect upon it.
Practice that initiates exactly what you're saying.
So when I look at the health and fitness industry and people on autopilot and people who are still being governed by the mode of school where you're told to do this and you do it without questioning it because that's just what you do we get to a point where we're training 6 times a week for 45 minutes a day, doing a 45-minute class that tells us to do it in this exact way and thrashing ourselves for 45 minutes, and we believe that that's what is right? Is that where we've gotten to with our training?
It's definitely where most people believe that what they should be doing. And
we don't have to name any businesses.
No. You don't need to, do you? I think we all know what they are.
Yeah.
Well, and that's it. I think what I am noticing kind of working in that same sort of model a little bit now. Back when I first entered into the fitness industry, it was that this new method of training really came onto the market, and it was like 45 minutes, don't have to think, just come in, flog yourself, get out, sweat profusely, and you feel like you've done something. But then also maybe not factoring recovery time in there and training to your hormones as a woman and things like that.
That's a big topic.
Yeah, what does that look like?
For women in training.
Training to your cycle.
Understanding your cycle is massively under known about.
And to be honest, even as a woman, it wasn't something that I was even educated on. And tell you, like, I've only just really learnt that over the last 5 years, and I'm still figuring it out.
What does it look like for you?
So for me, it's just knowing at certain points of the month, like when to go really hard, when not to, when to pull back, just noticing your energy as well. Like I know if I'm ovulating, for example, I've got so much more energy, which is like halfway through my cycle. And that's when I know that I'm like, okay, I can probably push it a little bit more here, but as it's getting closer, I'm getting tighter and things like that. So just like understanding my cycle, and it's going to be very different for everybody. And I'm very energy based. Like when I train now versus back, even when I entered the fitness industry, it was very much about the aesthetic. And I just still was in that mindset of like, I'm training to look good and fit the mold of what society and like social media is showcasing what you should look like. And it was, my brain was very much there.
As a trainer or as just a woman in your 20s?
As a trainer, for sure. Because you like, you obviously have the pressure of, especially working in a group environment, you're in front of a lot of people. You want to be somebody that is an inspiration to other people to kind of, want to be a little bit like. But just as a woman as well, so back then, I started my personal training studies about 9 years ago. So really at the beginning of that, right up until I would say, 4 or 5 years in, it was very much about the aesthetic, looking good. Whereas now I just train to feel good. And sometimes I don't train. Like sometimes I don't have the capacity and my work will override the time that I have for training. And now I don't beat myself up about it. If I get 2 sessions in a week when I know I have a massive week and maybe I'm just about to get my period, I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. I need to just take a step back here and know that I actually don't have the energy for it. And I know that will change when my period ends and I gain more energy again and maybe I get a little bit more time back. But I have pulled the lid off in terms of pressure now when it comes to training because I enjoy it more that way.
I think that's so powerful for women to hear coming from you because it's, I think in the 90s and noughties we created little men. You can do all the same things. Just go 4 weeks, 52 weeks a year. Just go hard or go home. And it was really detrimental in my experience to women's health in both physical and psychological because I see so many women that would, do really well for 2 weeks and then get into their luteal phase up towards their bleed and crash and get really demotivated, do 2 sessions in a week, put on weight, not understand that they needed more calories, not less. And then, the cycle, as it were, would continue and their results would be tempered. It's already harder for women to lose weight. Societal norms, less muscle mass, and then you add in this hormonal fluctuation and it's completely understandable why you see this yo-yo diet and effect.
And I think so to hear individual for each woman as well.
Yeah.
Like it's so individual for each woman. So even like for me guiding another woman in, like I always say that this is what I do, but that probably may not work for you, but just kind of having a bit of an overarching understanding that like if you learn to just understand where your energy levels are at each month based on your hormones and understand that exactly like you said, towards the time of a bleed, you're naturally like, I know for me personally, like I get quite fluidy, I retain a lot more water, my boobs are sore, like I don't want to go for a run, like things like that.
But if you weigh yourself at that point, you think, oh crap, like I've been dieting really hard and now I've put weight back on or I haven't lost any weight and I look worse. And you don't understand those mechanisms.
So we've got to be kind to ourselves about the natural flux.
It's again just getting back to being conscious, like tracking your cycle, being aware of these things and then...
Because that consciousness leads to being able to be more compassionate to yourself about, I have this overarching goal, but I know that within it, there's going to be a flux because I have a cycle and this is what happens within that cycle. You're getting really informed. So we're coming back to like...
Informed and conscious is probably the right way to put it.
We're coming back to, actually reflecting upon these things, what's going on, having a critical eye with these things, getting the information.
Yeah.
And I might say just to name drop and just to give a little bit of a shout out here, but one of my very good friends, her name's Lydia, I'm connected with her through Nike. She has a business called Femi, and that is where I've learnt everything about the menstrual cycle.
Well, it's great. We want people to name drop things that are fantastic.
So Femi,
tools.
And they have an app, and the app tracks your cycle. She's a running coach, and so it's very much about training to your cycle, and there's a lot of running guidance in there, but just in general, like their Instagram page is super informative. Femi, if you're listening and you're a person who menstruates, go and follow them, because it's a really great platform for education. And our age, growing up in school, which is so crazy to think, like, how were we not educated on our menstrual cycles in school?
I mean, both from a male and female perspective, though, right? Like, as a man, understanding what my wife's going through is actually really powerful in our bid for connection in what is a very busy time. And then, but also, like, as an employer, understanding what women are going through and not trying to avoid that conversation. Oh, you got women's troubles. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, you can go home. Let's just not talk about it. Like, it's sort of robbing women of their power. And this is very much this. That's why I was like, I want to sort of get well done for like opening up and giving that conversation, and thank you. And
as a coach as well, as a male coach of females, it's important to understand the biology of a woman and what makes how it works, and at least just having a base level understanding, so you can, as a coach, get the best out of your clients as well. So it serves everyone to understand what a female's body goes through every single month.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 100%.
You mentioned the word connection there, not in relation to this, but I've often felt, when I'm training by myself, I actually can feel quite isolated, right, and quite alone in my training. I'm actually quite well informed. Yeah. I've done my personal training course. I've coached for a few years.
Owned a gym.
Yeah, I've owned a gym. I know, plenty of stuff, but I can feel quite isolated. And
in what way isolated? Like when you're training?
When I'm training, like I actually do better when there's more connection, when there's more community, when there's other people. It might just be one other person, like it might just be training with you, or it's in a bigger situation of group training. I want to know, what role do you guys feel, and this is probably the flip side of that, get in there and smash it out for 45 minutes. That's the positive side of it. What role do you feel like connection and community play in people's relationship with it?
Huge. Yeah, huge. It's everything. I had a client this morning say to me in a small group personal training that I do, I came for the gains, but I stayed for the bands. So
love that.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I'm having that as my new tagline.
I wish gains and bants rhymed.
It would have been so much better.
So much. I can't unthink that.
But yeah, it's everything. In my own personal journey, I came to the realization recently when I moved into the garage that actually I don't love training. It's not like I like the results. I like the after effects. I like the skill adaptation that I can acquire for my body. But the actual meat and nuts of the workout, like I don't love it. What I loved was the connection. I loved training with other trainers. I loved going to a class and being around that environment. The gym, in a way, for a lot of people, has taken over from religion in that there's an established set of rules. There's a sort of semi-hierarchy. There's leaders, like, there's this community that you can go to and connect. And
as we become more secular as a society, we're in need of more community spaces.
And we're so isolated. You now are told to, move out at the earliest possible moment and go and live by yourself and travel by yourself and do all these things by yourself. And we're not built that way. We were built on the back of community. It's how we established ourselves as the apex predator. It's why I think that a lot of depression and anxiety exists in people that are alone, because I think it's a well-established mechanism for if you were alone in a tribe, you were going to die. Like that was no ifs or buts or maybes. And so now when we're alone for an extended period of time, now I think the brain formulates that as depression and anxiety. So I think that's something that the fitness industry has given back to society a little bit, is this connection, this community. And I think it's I think it's the most powerful thing. And if anybody ever wanted my advice on how to form a fitness into a habit, it's to go and be part of a community. Don't try and necessarily do it to yourself, but evolve within a community.
And I couldn't agree more, because I think back to, community is actually one of my core values as just a human. Yeah. But I feel as though that is the reason that I've entered or stayed in the fitness industry as a coach, because I even think back to the early days when I first started working in the group fitness environment. The people whom I met in that environment are now the people who are so integral in my life and in my dynamic as a friendship group. Like, they are my best friends. Like, my life would just be nowhere near as bright and colourful without this group of people that I met in a gym. And you just don't get that if you're not, putting yourself in those spaces. And I couldn't agree more. And I see it now as a gym owner of a group fitness place in Air Locker. We have members that say to us all the time, like, we literally come here for you, for your coaches. It's like the working out is like the bonus. But if anything, it's like we literally continue to rock up here because of the friends that we make. And it's like the 5:15 a.m. crew, or like the religious crew. They're the same people. They're there every day. And it's like a beautiful way to start the day around people that are like-minded. And, to the point now that, like, even our coaches have formed this little friendship group and they all hang out outside of work together. And
nice.
I love it. I froth it. And that's like my favourite thing about working in this space is the witnessing that, like being the facilitator of connection, essentially, just bringing people together and watching how these little relationships and bonds form. It's so beautiful to me. And that's why I'm so passionate. That's why I love the Breath House. Is another place, I listened to your conversation with Ella and Nathan. I teach there as a breathwork facilitator, and they've created such a beautiful community. I love people and bringing people together. And like, to your point, I've noticed a lot of times where people have moved from interstate, they don't know anyone. It's happened quite a few times at Air Locker, where they've come over, they've had no friends here, and then all of a sudden they have this whole community of people that they get to call their friends. So I could not recommend more. If you're somebody that is feeling a little isolated, maybe a little bit alone, you've maybe moved somewhere away from people that and a family or whatever, go and find a community. Might be the run club boom is massive at the moment. It might be a gym. But
yoga.
There's so much. But go find community, because they're everywhere. They're endless.
Yeah, and it's so powerful in terms of longevity. Have you guys heard of the study they did in America that's been going on for over 80 years? Yeah, it's started, I'm going to say Stanford University, and they took a cohort of, it was only men at the time, because only men in their 20s went to university, and JFK was within that cohort. And they've studied them throughout their lifetimes, and then they've studied their partners now and their children. And there's like 3 or 4 generations that have gone through this study. And I listened to I think it's one of the most listened to podcasts, TED Talks, on the internet. And I listened to him talk, the head scientist who's now in charge of it, about their findings. And the take home from it was that the number one thing that you can do for your long-term health is connection.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll have to put that in the show notes.
So put that in the show notes.
over somebody that smoked, took drugs, alcohol, had a poor diet, was obese. If they had, and to also go into a final point, it was your long-term partner that really, the closeness and the connection that you had with your long-term partner that really drove your longevity. And they extrapolated that to be, because they're such a great stress management tool. You can have a bad day and you can go home and you can unload, and you're not alone. And they did make the point that it wasn't necessarily, this sort of normal, heteronormal, boy, girl. It could be anyone, and it doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. It could just be a friendship that you share your life with somebody and you call them up and you speak to them. But having that closeness where you can be your true self, mask off was the number one driving factor for longevity, which I thought was fascinating.
There was a Netflix series of a similar nature called Blue Zones. It talked about the longest living people in the world, and the interconnection or byplay between all of them was obviously diet and exercise, but the exercise was more like passive exercises, just like working in a garden, or people who live to the top of a hill, or but faith was a big part of it, believing something bigger than oneself, the power of something bigger than oneself. But it was connection and community, having a community. And
it's a great doco.
Yeah, great doco. So, no, I really love that. Hey, earlier, Megzy, you talked about the pressures to look a certain way as a trainer, to uphold a vision of what people need to see as a trainer. It's like, don't trust a skinny chef. Don't trust a fat PT. Like, there's these things that were built into us, even subliminally. What levels have you ever felt like you've gone to levels that are unhealthy in order to uphold that pressure? Because I know I have as a trainer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just overtraining for sure. Like my relationship at that point when my headspace was very much about aesthetics and looking a certain way, it was just so much training, overtraining twice a day. And it was in that time where it was all very new, that whole group fitness boom that happened, 6-7 years ago. It was interesting because there was an element of it that I was probably overtraining, but more, I actually enjoyed it because it was connection. I was going because I was like, I'm going to see my mates in the morning class and my mates in the afternoon class. And, I was always there. I was like working as well. So you're just constantly active. And realizing that when you are overtraining like that, you're not allowing your body to recover. Your hormones are probably all over the place and you crash and burn. You get to the point where you're completely exhausted and burnt out. So that was very much, the pressure was, it really stemmed from, just wanting to look a certain way and then just absolutely flogging myself to do it. Whereas now, and I think it's an element of just as you get older, you give less fucks, basically. You don't care as much about what people think and instead you start to learn, what do I actually care about? And that was just one of the lessons that I learned along the way as I've gained more awareness and consciousness, speaking of consciousness. And so now I'm so much happier. I'm so much happier with the way that I train. And I still have a lot of us, I have a very versatile training schedule. Like I'll do a little bit of Pilates, I'll go for a little bit of a run, or do strength and conditioning. And I like to keep it quite broad and that keeps me enjoying it. And that's not going to be right for everyone. People sometimes just like to have their very structured training regime. But like I said, now I love training now. Like you mentioned before that, you realize maybe I don't love it that much, but because I don't have pressure on it anymore, I've removed the pressure. It's just like if I have the chance to train today and I feel like I've got the energy for it, let's go. But if I don't, then my life isn't going to change because of it. So taking that pressure lid off has given me a real sense of joy when it comes to training now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it sounds like you're less focused on an outcome.
Yeah.
And more focused on a process.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. That's actually talking about a quote, which I'll share a little bit later when we get to it. But that's the biggest lesson that I'm learning at the moment, even just in business, in life, is it is so much more for me about the journey versus the destination, because you get so fixated on the end goal, like let's do this 6-week challenge so I can have lost 5 kilos by the end. And even in the gym now, when I tell my clients, I'm like, of course it's good to have that goal. It's if you have a weight loss goal or a muscle building goal, great. But let's actually focus on what habits you implement along the way. Let's focus on how you feel when you know that you show up to train 3 or 4 times a week versus never before. Like, make that be the gift, because you'll get the result in the end if that's your focus.
Yeah. And
if it's so much about this outcome, you lose all of that along the way. You miss the best bit.
Yeah, your peripheral goes.
Yeah.
The excitement and enjoyment and love of the people that you're sharing it with, this sort of community section goes, I've been there. And I want to ask you guys, there are a lot of 8-week fads, diets, transformation challenges, extremes, things. We talk about extremity, extreme calorie deficits, extreme, diet changes and nutritional changes, extreme training programming to shift you from where you are to where the version of you needs to be or society's telling you need to be. What have you found are the inherent problems with transformation challenges?
I hate to just say the same thing, but I've got no issue with transformation challenges in and of themselves, actually. I have an issue with how you use them.
Yep.
So just like if it's better to lose the weight in a short period of time than to never lose it at all. But if you're just going to pile that back on once you've finished.
Yeah, show me the after shot.
Yeah. And look, in an ideal world, I think too many people go into it in a fear-based mechanism. Like we go into it because I don't want to end up like my parents, or like I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z, rather than something that's a bit more joyful. In an ideal world, everybody would go into this with a process-driven, joyful manner, and you'd connect and get the community. But I also understand where we're at as a society, and that's just not the way that people are at the moment. And so I don't mind if you're moving away from something rather than towards something, as long as you understand that. And I don't mind if you want to go and use a transformation challenge in order to kickstart what is hopefully now going to be a long-term thing. And also, honestly, like if eating 1,200 calories for 4 weeks is how you're going to get there, it's not what I would recommend. It's definitely not something that's going to, be sustainable. But if you're aware of all of those things and you choose to do it that way, and you understand the process after that challenge of how you're going to manage your life moving forwards, fine, okay. But I think, to answer your question probably a little bit more succinctly, the problem with it is that that's not the thing that's sold, and then there's no aftercare afterwards, or there's no understanding from the client, and there's no coaching from the coach that that's what's going to happen to you. It's just, no, we've got your money now, and away you go, and if you crash, you crash. And then afterwards, this is your journey, not mine.
What should be there afterwards? Yeah. Like an 8-week integration challenge, followed. But like, what needs to happen after it? Something that extreme to.
Well, if you were to do something that extreme,
that's right. 1,200 calories a day, training 6 days a week.
Yeah, I just wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, don't do that for 8 weeks. Firstly.
yeah, 4 weeks was different, but 8 weeks definitely more as a woman actually you'll crash and burn, and it's almost guaranteed that you're going to fail. In terms of, you might succeed in that 8 weeks, but afterwards you're going to be completely cooked and shot.
You almost need a one-on-one person to help guide you out of that. You need, because
if you're not educated and
you need somebody that you're working
with. Intrinsic value set.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
I know, which is where I thought it was probably quite a good time to sort of drop it in that. So for me, to bring an intrinsic value set into something that's quite extrinsically motivated, I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z, or I want to look a certain way. Finding the power of purpose. Like, why are you doing the thing that you're doing? Like, what are you afraid of, and why are you afraid of it? And what happens in that 8 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, 12 weeks' time? Like, if you achieve what you want to achieve, what does that look like? And then if you don't achieve what you want to achieve, like, how does that look? And like understanding those mechanisms, and then developing what your purpose is. Like, we did this great thing from Lewis Howes, that meditation on like what your life looks like in 5 years' time. If there are no obstacles, there's no failure, right? Like, if you looked at it forwards into your life, into 5 years or 10 years or 12 months, doesn't matter. What would you be doing if you couldn't fail? If I bought a lottery ticket and I won, if I moved to the Maldives and set up my ideal life, like, think big. And I think that's such a powerful sort of thing to do for someone, because if your life is like Google Maps, if there's no destination on the screen, it's very unlikely you're going to get there. Whereas if you can at least put a destination into the map, it will give you a few different options of which way you go, and you might change and go somewhere else. But that purpose behind driving you through this 8-week challenge or this fitness journey at least leads you somewhere productive. And I think that is probably the number one thing that I would say to someone thinking about approaching one of these challenges is, understand your why and develop a purpose.
Yeah, and look, I felt as a trainer back in the day that people were coming to me for an extrinsic makeover when really they needed a much deeper intrinsic look into their own state, whether that's fears or their mental health stuff or whatever. And I felt like I became a therapist of sorts, and I was not qualified for that. And occasionally I go, I think you need to go and see someone, because the extrinsic makeover, no matter how many changes we made to an individual's, I made to an individual or helped an individual make to their body is the best way to describe it extrinsically, it never filled up the void of an intrinsic lack.
And that's why
self-worth plays a huge part.
Massive. And I say this a lot. It's like a slogan of mine, but you simply cannot have a healthy body unless you start by addressing your mind.
Yep, that's right.
You have to have a whole body practice, mind, body and spirit, to ensure that you are working towards this destination, but with your values being the driver. And I believe that's a big part of why I now have this breathwork facilitation cert, because I want to be able to help my clients both physically but also mentally. And it's nice to see that there is a more of a shift in this kind of conversation online. You know, you're seeing a lot more conversation around holistic wellness and mindfulness. And I'm so big on sharing mindful tools like, journaling, affirmations, all these things, meditation. The toolkit can be endless. And I think building a robust mental wellbeing toolkit is going to greatly impact the way that you train and if you want to get results, focus on the mind and the body.
Yep.
And the results they'll come.
They'll come. We had Todd Woodbridge on the first episode, and he talked about the sort of columns of his life and some career and finance. But I look at the columns of wellness or of health and fitness, and for me, it's always physical, nutritional, emotional, mental, spiritual. And if I'm feeling a sense of lack, I look at those 5 sort of things and go, where am I lacking? It's going to be in one of those 5 departments. I can be really fit and be eating really well and feel like I'm focused and mentally on top of things and feel quite good within myself. But geez, I'm in a rush. Geez, I don't feel present. You haven't meditated in a few days, have you, mate? Or, geez, when was the last time you went and hugged a tree or just, got out in nature and soaked that in? Hold up, I'm a human being. I am nature. When I'm in nature, I feel more connected to it because I'm more connected to myself. Okay, spiritual component is at 10%.
Yeah.
Let's charge this guy up.
And that's where I'm at the moment. I actually said it to my girlfriend yesterday. I said, I have allowed the spiritual side of my practice to completely dissipate, fall by the wayside. My spiritual practice has just been left to just wither away while all these other things take priority. But I'm noticing it in myself. I'm feeling like really disconnected. And so I said to her, I pulled out my angel cards the other day, and it was such a silly, I've got my singing bowl and pull my angel cards out. And that one simple thing just made me feel like, oh, wow, okay, that makes me feel so much better. Just that tiny little practice. And it's important to have a focus on all of those areas to ensure that you are rocking up every day as the best possible version of yourself. And we are human, and it's hard to prioritize it all and
time
have
and
a
kids
family.
And there's all of these things and work and all this. But what we're talking about really is balance.
And awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to add the last little bit to that is that I see so much online of like, I got up this morning at 2:45 and then I did my gratitude journaling and I did 40 minutes of meditation and then I did 2 hours in the gym and then I did all my food prep and blah, 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 blah. And I don't think you have to live like that. Like what you guys are talking about and explaining is beautiful. But I think the misunderstanding in this is that you need to be doing every one of those things all day, every day. And I think learning and understanding from people like yourselves and like getting your tool bag filled up so that when your cup in one of your cups is drained, you can go and you can do your spiritual practice or you can do your physical practice. And that's that, learning that through life. I think for anybody that was sort of seeking a more holistic program, I mean, that's what the fifth direction was, right? Or is now, is that it's mind, it's body, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And those 4 quadrants, I put nutritional in body, or 5 sort of cups for you. Having the toolkit to be able to fill those cups up, I think that's what I would like if I was a client coming into a practitioner or a gym, is that can you educate me on those 5 things or 4 things? And then I'm ready to tackle the world and I'm empowered by that.
Yeah. This is great because we're getting into, what your sort of training philosophies, I guess, are, and they are broad spectrum. And I like what you said, Duncan, that it doesn't actually have to be a more is more.
Yeah. In fact, actually, more is sometimes less and often less. Like if I have to get up at 2:45 in the morning, I'm pretty tired, or I have to go to bed at 7:30 at night, and what connection do I lose with my partner or my friends? And you were talking about like and yourself as well, like how the negative side, like have you dipped into the negative side of fitness in your own practice? And I think that's what shows up first is when you try and get too lean, or you spend too much time training, or you spend too much time in any other aspect, right? Like you can meditate for 5 hours a day, but you're losing time elsewhere. We've all got the same amount of time in a day, and if you're not, if it's robbing you from going out and sharing your life with other people, I think that's when it starts to impact and be negative.
Yeah. I've seen you in various different physical versions of yourself, aesthetically. Do you feel better when you have abs that can be seen? Have you actually ever felt better?
I know that like, not necessarily you, but maybe the audience wants me to say no. But actually, in a way, yeah, absolutely, I felt better. I felt like I looked good, and therefore I felt good. But in a way, I'm also relatively naturally lean. It's not like it robs too much from me to get to that point. But I have been to that point where, I'm in like low.
But did it rob you of your mobility?
This is part of the conversation. And so the part of it is no. Part of it is I fucking loved it. It was great.
Yep.
But part of it, there's a nuance to it, and there's a tipping point where, I would take it too far. I didn't enjoy the food the way that I know that I can enjoy food. And food isn't just a mechanism to get fatter or to get slimmer. Food is, again, connection. Like it's we sit around a round table and we chat and we enjoy a good meal, or you prepare it. Like I said this to a client the other day. I was like, have you ever bought a meal, Uber, or got a meal delivered that tastes better than one that was prepared for you?
Never.
No, because there wasn't the love poured into that food. Like if I'm preparing a meal for my family, there's a certain element of love that goes into that food. And not to get too woo-woo with it, but the food feels that, like, and you,
You love woo-woo.
Yeah. But the food feels that, the food knows that, and therefore you sort of present that and share in it, and that shared experience becomes connection. That's what's was robbed from me for a period of time when I was deeply into that.
Broccoli and sweet potato and chicken world.
Yeah. And so, that's the element that
Did you ever weigh your food and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, sorry, but I highly recommend still doing that, but for a month.
Just to know what.
Just to
Just
know.
having an understanding.
'Cause,
Agree.
Yeah, portion control is everything. Well, not everything, but it's a big part of nutrition. And so just to understand it, but if you're getting to the point where you're weighing your food and you're going to take a little doggy bag with you to a restaurant because you're not going to know the macros or the calorie count of the food in the restaurant, like that's a problem.
You know, my mum takes a little doggy bag, but not because of the macros, because she likes the Meredith goat's cheese and she doesn't like when people stinge out in cafes and stuff for brunch and don't give them
love that.
So she
She's
brings a little bit of Meredith
hero.
goat's cheese and stuff and she pours it. So HP and a bit of it. Shout out, HP. Love you. Have you ever got to a point, either of you, where I know you said you were training a lot, like whether you're using training to numb something else, like an addict, like you got addicted to it? Because I know I did. I was having a really tough time in a relationship with my ex-wife in my 20s, and I wasn't very good at communicating what I was feeling in that stage. I just didn't have the tools and didn't have the capabilities or the courage. And so rather than expressing what I was deeply feeling on the inside, I was like, well, I'm going to fix this, unconsciously saying this, I'm going to fix this by changing my relationship with myself on the outside. So I just became very, very addicted to training.
I haven't had that personally, but I've seen that. I've seen that a lot actually in the spaces that I've worked in with people that are just going through really tough times. And yeah, it's funny because it's like, you know, movement exercise training is a healthy outlet, but yeah, if you're using it as a means to escape your home environment and escapism, then obviously it's not. But I certainly have seen it. Mine was the flip side. Is when I've gone through really tough times before, my outlet was like over socializing, like, you know, in conjunction with working in the fitness industry and getting up at 5 a.m. and giving all my energy and pouring it into all the people that I connect with day to day. But mine escapism, my numbing was to just socialize, always be out, always be distracted, always be just outside of my house where I'm sitting on the couch by myself.
So not go inward, go outward.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
Avoiding the inner monologue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Avoiding reflection, avoiding awareness, avoiding
all those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. But training for sure. If you're not like anything, if anything that you're using to escape and you're using it to numb, even if it is a healthy tool, like training is actually, you've really got to question that. What's my driver here? What is my why? Like what you talked about, Dunk.
And we all have an addiction. And obviously we've talked about social media at length, and, you know, the phone is all of ours to a degree because that's society. But we're all built into addiction at some level. It's a part of our human construct that
we're just swapping addictions.
We're just swapping addictions. But it's like, so yeah, we had an episode, earlier this season about sports betting, and we had a guy, Mark Kempster, come on who lost $100,000 plus to sports gambling. He was a fully blown addict, and he's come out the side, but not without a huge journey. But that's one addiction. For me, you know, it was exercise was a very, very unhealthy, unsafe addiction, and it played a lot into my self-worth and body image. And, you know, there was a period there, like, I'm going to be really open with you guys, for about 18 months where I was either exercise bulimic or bulimic. You know, it was pretty full on.
Yeah. I have never used exercise in terms like from that, but the reason that I became addicted to exercise to begin with was because I was bullied in school.
Right.
And I mean, I'm about 92 kilos now, but I was 68 kilos in school, and I was the same height as I am now. And so my whole thing is I've sort of viewed myself through this lens of just being this stick thin guy that, you know, had to run around in the shower to get wet. And so going to the gym sort of it filled that space for me. And yeah, that was confronting, challenging, something I wasn't really aware of too much at the time.
I don't think we're ever aware of it when we're in it. We're just trying to fix something.
Yeah.
Have you Have you had a conversation with 68 kilo Duncan since then?
No. I've never gone back to that.
You've never said, you've never, yeah, okay.
No, I've not healed that wound.
Really?
Yeah. No, to be honest, mate, I hadn't even thought about talking to that guy until you just brought it up. Thought about the guy before that, like the younger child. But yeah, never really even consider. It's a powerful, sort of conversation to have.
Yeah.
We
speak to each other enough. Call me after you've had that chat to it. That version of yourself. I think it's important. I've had to have a chat with my 8% body fat Josh that walked around masking so many things.
And what happens to that guy, right? When you're so addicted to training, then what happens to your mind when something gets in the way, when you can't train that way? What's your dialogue?
Dialogue is a dialogue of failure. Yeah. And not the sort of failure that is sort of a stoic obstacle is the way kind of failure. Like it's the failure was, all right, I've starved myself of a packet of chips because I've been so, it's 100 grams of this and 220 grams of this and whatever. And I have a package. Okay, what about two? Oh, fuck it, I'm off the wagon now, And then guilt and shame. But that doesn't start until the guilt doesn't kick in until really the pizza and the whole tub of ice cream and this relationship with food that is so damaging.
Toxic,
it's toxic, all or nothing.
I think it's so common.
It is common.
Mate.
That's what I was just about to say.
I've worked through this stuff, but I'm sure lots of people are listening to it, going, I get it. Where you go, I've fucked up. I might as well really fuck up.
Mm-hmm. They did a study on it. They got two groups. I think it was
It's like a self-sabotage thing.
Yeah. I think it was almost a Michael McIntyre show where they got two groups. They were on a restrictive diet, all calorie controlled. And then one day they went to a workshop where they made cakes and they told one group that the cake was a low calorie cake that they made and they told the other group the truth. And the group they all taste a little bit. The group that had the low calorie cake only had a little bit. The group that knew that it was a high calorie cake smashed the whole thing. And it was because the group that had the low calorie cake knew that they could have that low calorie cake and still stay on plan. Whereas the other group knew that even if they had some of it, they were off plan. And so fuck it, they might as well eat it all. And I think it's just, it's very common human behavior to view your nutritional plan through that lens, or any plan really. It's like, I've got a crack in the case, I might as well smash the whole thing. And so, I think
this is this extremity thing that we talked about.
Good on you for sharing.
Yeah,
it's powerful.
Yeah, because it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be that. And everyone, we always hear it's everything in moderation, but it really is.
Yeah,
it really is. Like cliches are made for a fucking reason, because people have lived through some shit and they've gone, there's a better way from this. Everything's better in extremity. No, that doesn't work. No. It was moderation. After that big share, I'd love to hear your quotes. You may have brought something in.
You want me to go?
Well, yeah, you can go first. Go for it, Dan.
So we talked a lot about stoicism. Stoicism's a big part of sort of how I'll try and show up to the world every day. This is actually a Rumi quote.
I hate Rumi. I never use Rumi on the show.
No, I didn't think you would. And I'm gonna
don't shoot Duncan down.
No, Duncan knows that's my dry sarcasm.
Complete sarcasm.
He's learnt me long enough. I'm sure he's still working it out.
I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. He's so cutting. He's so sharp.
That was mean.
Literally live the Rumi life.
Right. Yeah. I was like, wow. How can you not like that?
But bedside table is literally the book of Rumis.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. I'm sure you'd open and close the show with Rumi quotes if you could. Run from what's comfortable. Run from safety. Live where you fear to live. Be notorious. Destroy your reputation. Those two are the other way around. And that's the bit that I love as well, is like this idea of almost the phoenix from the flames. Destroy your reputation. is like this rebirth and this constant idea of evolution. But run from what's comfortable, obviously the obstacle being away, and run from safety. Live where you fear to live. It speaks to me on a deep level, probably because I'm terrified of actually embodying particularly that last part, right? Like live where you fear to live, like do things that you're afraid of doing. And like today's a prime example, like this isn't my comfort zone, but it's definitely a philosophy or a mantra that I would try and live by, is like seek out discomfort daily.
I know why it's not in your comfort zone, because you're not intelligent, insightful, or have heaps of great information to share with people. So
you can see why.
The amount of research reflection piece that you have shared today, I'm like, where do you learn all these things?
Duncan, he's a wizard. He's a little guru. He's a 6'4", 92 kilo guru.
It's amazing.
I like the destroy your reputation.
Yeah.
And I'm just as you said that, I said to myself, I think I'm in that phase of life where I present a pretty cookie cutter, well-groomed version of Josh. You look at Josh online, he achieves a lot, he sets out big goals and he crushes them, he's taken on the world of musical theatre, and he's like, it's bright, it's light, it's all happening for him. But this show has certainly been an opportunity to go, oi, behind that mask, like we talked about on social media, always a highlight reel. And I've gotten better at sharing things that aren't always highlights, but I also know that
much better.
Yeah,
you've gone on a massive journey since coming back from England. You're very much more grounded and centered.
Yeah,
as a human.
But it's been a part of literally doing exactly what's in that quote.
Yeah,
and just going, hey, the rough and the mud and the clunky, crunchy, shitty stuff is the human imperfection that connects you with people.
Yeah, that's the magic, isn't it?
Yeah.
No mud, no lotus.
Pardon?
No mud, no lotus.
No mud, no lotus.
Yeah.
So, I have definitely been in that part, and just go, you know what? If it destroys a reputation or it destroys a vision of me that some, Phantom of the Opera fan has of, oh my God, this is how I've, pictured or envisaged this human. Yeah. He can't have been bulimic. He can't have, had this problem or that problem. But yeah.
It goes back to connection though as well,
it's
doesn't
connection,
it?
Yeah.
Like the more that you are that and are able to pull that mask down and be that.
How freeing
it is for you as a human, but how much it builds and fosters connection with other people that go through, we're all going through something.
So, exactly. And the guests that have come on this thing, like yourselves included, like they've shared so much of themselves, and I've just gone, oh my God, I feel like I could catch up with you for, a coffee or a meal, and we just continue on from where we left off. It creates a rapport and a friendship. And so, I really value that. And in my friendships, I felt like I've changed tune.
You show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the number one thing I can say for you is you show up on a weekly basis.
Love you, mate. Megsy, what's your quote?
Love. So mine's a Kobe Bryant quote. He did an interview with Jay Shetty, obviously a little while before he passed, and it speaks to what we've kind of been discussing today about, not getting so fixated on the end goal all the time, the outcome, and really enjoying the journey along the way. So it's not the results that matter, it's the figuring it out that matters, which really speaks to me and where I'm at the moment in my own personal life in terms of work, especially starting business and constantly having to remind myself and pull myself up all the time about, you are always going to face road bumps. There's always going to be hurdles. There's always going to be challenges along the way. And in the moment, those challenges and those road bumps can feel so rattling and frustrating. And in actual fact, when you look back and when you kind of reach that destination, you realize that road bump in that moment taught me so much. It taught me how to communicate a little bit better. It taught me about patience and even resilience. And so that is something that I'm finding myself coming back to a lot at the moment. Take the pressure off. it being so much about the final end goal, the outcome, and just enjoy the ride.
What do you think that is for you, that as someone who has been an A1 goal-setting king and has to knock them down, what do you think that is within you that has been into that final result?
Well, for me, I just think...
Where do you think it comes from?
I don't know where that would come from, but what it is for me is like, you know, going back to that self-awareness. Like, I'm a very reflective, I would say relatively self-aware human, and I really value being the best version of myself and being able to show up as somebody that does offer value into other people's lives and inspires and is insightful. And I feel like having to catch myself in the middle, because I am often so fixated on the goal, like get to the end, get to this saving money goal, or get to this wellbeing, health and fitness goal, do this amount of sessions per week, do this amount of meditation per week, like always that. But it's like what you said before, bring it back to the why and actually uncover like what's the drive. And I really value the idea of understanding myself and knowing myself deeply and exploring what makes me tick and why do I want to get to there. So I don't really know where that has come from per se, but I really enjoy understanding myself and having an awareness of the why.
And what is, like, with purpose, soul purpose, deeper purpose comes up a lot on this show. What is that purpose? What is the why behind the many whats and the many vessels that many hats and roles that you play, many masks that you wear?
That's a good question. For me, it's wanting to leave a legacy and make sure that each person that I interact with, particularly my family, you know, I mentioned earlier that I've got, just in my family alone, my cousin has 13 kids, and, you know, I'm a very passionate, very proud Aboriginal woman, and for me, it's wanting to make sure that these little kids, who are my closest, darling, dearest family members, look up and know that they can do whatever they want, and I'm leading by example. And so that's a massive driver for me, and not just in my family. I do a little bit of volunteering at a school on Fridays, the Melbourne Indigenous Transition School, and I just think for me it's really important to lead the way for the next generation. And by no means am I anywhere near nailing that. I'm fucking up a lot along the way, but fucking up plenty. But I really want to make sure that each person that I touch and that I encounter, I'm leaving them better than they maybe were before, or at least imparting some kind of tool or wisdom to help them feel like a better version of themselves, which is why I'm so passionate about breathwork and mindfulness. And I think just inspiring and influencing people to live happier and healthier lives. That's my great, wide, big purpose, I would say.
You mentioned legacy. If I was to speak at your funeral, what would you hope that I'd say about your legacy?
Oh gosh, I love that question as well. And actually, I went to an event, the Chumpy Pullen Gala, and for anyone that doesn't know Chumpy Pullen, he was a snowboarder and died in a freak accident. And they spoke a lot about legacy at this event, and that from that point on, it's really stuck with me because of that reason. And I really would hope that people would say that Megsy was somebody who was just made people feel like they were her friend, and was so...
Or just made people feel.
Made people feel, yeah.
Isn't that a great gift to give to someone?
Yeah, made people feel, and just made people feel safe and connected and part of a community. And I'd hope that people would say that they think that I'm a good person and that they enjoyed being around me, and that I was a positive little light in the world. That's what I would hope that they would say anyway.
Yeah, I'd say that. I'd say that. Dunk, what would you say that your sole purpose is?
I have a few. My family, they're the sort of deep-rooted number one thing at the moment. We've got 4 young kids, and trying to mould them in a way that they positively impact the world as well. I think, that's a big driver for me. But I've spoken at length with my wife about this. It's not the thing that completely fills my cup up. I love them dearly, but I couldn't be a stay-at-home father, for example. Like it's just not within me. I'd be a bad stay-at-home father because I wouldn't be happy in my role. It doesn't fill up all of my cups.
Can I challenge you on this?
Sure.
If I'm looking at the definition of sole purpose, I'm coming from a place where the things that we bring it to can be many vessels, and they might be interchanging. So if your purpose was your children, and let's say horrifically something happened to all of them, do you suddenly, touch all wood, do you suddenly have no purpose in the world?
No, well, that's
so this is why I'm getting back to this sole purpose.
Sort of point is like they're not my sole purpose as much as I sort of love them, and that's probably like I was probably overcompensating a little bit there, in that I need them to know if they ever listen to this that they are a purpose, and I do love them dearly. But
could you bring your sole purpose to them?
Yeah, well, hopefully it's sort of as a conduit to the information that I've gathered throughout the last 16 years as a coach for other people. One of the reasons that I got into health and wellness was being bullied and sort of coming out of that. The other reason is that I have an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's, and I've been able to regulate that through health and wellness to the point where in the last few years, my blood work shows up as being completely normal. No antibodies, no nothing. I was medicated for 4 or 5 years in the beginning, and then I came off medication. I was able to stay off medication ever since. But my blood work was always all over the place. And I'm not free of it. Like, it's not done and dusted. But the antibodies don't show up in my blood anymore. Like, if I went to a doctor and got a blood test and didn't tell them that I had Hashimoto's, they wouldn't know that I had it. So,
and that's just through lifestyle choices.
I mean, I believe it is. I'm sure, like medical professionals might be able to challenge and say that the undulations of life might do that to you naturally, but no, breathwork, ice bath, sauna, training, nutritional understanding, gut health protocols, and healing yourself from within. So I know that gluten and dairy, I can eat them. I don't get huge symptoms, but I know that they don't agree with me on a blood level. Just trying to sort of be consistent through that. I forget how we got here, but...
Sole purpose.
Sole purpose.
He's avoided answering what his sole purpose is.
That's
Basically,
so interesting, though,
it's
because I have an autoimmune...
But my sole purpose is to not have Hashimoto's show up on my blood.
I remember now why I was telling that story, was because I want to share what I learned. Like, that was one of the ways that I got in. I was able to learn all this information about autoimmune disease and how it is, how you can... I'm not prophesizing being able to heal people. Like, that's not my role within society. But if I can be a conduit to this information and they can go and utilize it in conjunction with their medical professionals, then that's what my purpose here is that I would love to be able to impact as many people as possible in a positive way for their health. And that was one of the reasons why I got with you and we opened up the gym, is that in my role as a coach, I only have so many hours in a day. This is before online training was big. So I wanted to open up a venue that I could then bring people in, and I could then, teach people my sort of theories and philosophies and have them go out and teach it more, and it sort of butterfly effect its way out. So
I think it's so interesting how we attract such similar interested people into your realm as well. You and I really have only kind of met in real life like once before at the breath house, but it's like you can just...
Oh, but straight up we were like...
Hi.
Yeah, like, when, you look into the eyes of another individual and you see the awareness that's awake.
Yeah.
And and you start having a rapport. Yeah.
You gravitate towards that. And I just find that so interesting because so much of what you've said today is exactly what I would say I feel, and even the positive influence and all of that. And I find it really interesting going again back to connection, just that natural gravitation and pull towards the people that are very like-minded. And yeah, interesting that you've brought us all together today to have such a
if the table wasn't had such a large circumference, we'd hug. But hey, Duncan, you mentioned bullying a couple of times. What went down? I'd never know that these are Hashimoto's and bullying are two things of a man who I know so well that I never noticed. You went through.
Yeah, it's not something that I necessarily talk about because I don't want. It's not my story. It's something that happened, but it's not me. It's not who I am. I don't really hold any ill feeling to what it was. I don't think it's really that big a deal. And actually, not because of what it taught me, but because I think it was actually a positive thing for me in that, I didn't have a hard time in school. I was relatively good looking, tall, athletic. I feel like I could have got quite a big ego at that stage, and I think that really grounded me for a couple of years. And maybe that's why it happened to me, in an energetic level, but also maybe that's what they saw and that's what happened. But it was an odd type of bullying in that it was within my own friendship circle. So yeah, just daily torture. It's awesome. It's hard to sort of explain it, but it was little jibes. No, you're not playing this game with us, or play. And, I was always harshly treated or didn't get invited places, was sort of ostracized occasionally and then pulled back in. It was this emotional sort of roller coaster. And eventually I left the school and went to a better place. But yeah, I don't know, I would have been 13, 14. Around that sort of age, so quite formative. But
that's such a challenging time for people. It's the only time I don't wish upon, wish to re-experience adolescence.
I was in an all-boys school. It was hyper-masculine environment. I think it's one of the issues that school faces is that in a village that we would have grown up with for 300,000 years, there would have been a natural age hierarchy. But when you have a group of peers that are all the same age, there's no hierarchy, so it's chaos. And then when you put the absence of the feminine energy in there, I think that there's just no balance to it. So I think that's what happened to me. It wasn't great, but it also, I know people that have experienced way worse. So I wouldn't make a big thing of it for me.
It does. You don't realise though how long words can stick with you, even subconsciously. Speaking about bullying, I was never terribly targeted at school at all, but there were always a few little things, and especially from boys, getting picked on about having small boobs, or before I had braces, having really bad teeth, and the insecurity that festers inside of you with sometimes just one little comment. Is crazy, and of course it's like you said about
that stuck with me for years and right the way through my 20s for sure.
All stuck with me. All that stuff I talked about with regard to my obsession with fitness and body image was because in year 7 and 8 I had lots of puppy fat and guys who were more developed physically, because you get this such disparity. You get these 14-year-old boys who are like men and 14-year-old boys who are like me, who are such late bloomers. And they were just always like tubby little Jew boy. And I had, it's a cellulite, and I just had this really strong detest for my physical body. And
have you spoken to that guy?
Oh yeah. God, that's why I can speak about it to you. Yeah. I'm not bringing up shit that I haven't. It's not new shit for me.
I am apparently.
So I've spent a lot of time. He's had a lot of hugs and. A lot of love and a lot of tears and so thank you therapy, but that's what it grew out of. It grew out of bullying at 13, 14. So that's what I was interested in. It's like,
right.
It does, you do carry this stuff.
Yeah, it definitely affected me, and some of it was negative, but there was some positive in there as well.
I like that you find the positive. And that's inherent in most things that you do.
I think I try and do that with everything, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
What is and this can be either at a professional level or at a personal level, what is the most impactful event that's ever, or thing that you've done, or event that has occurred to you, or thing that someone said to you that's really sort of shifted your life?
Well, for me, in terms of a major life event, it was my dad passing away and him dying with a terminal illness. And that was
How long ago was that?
We had his 10-year anniversary this year, actually, on the 10th of July. And when you watch somebody with whom you love so deeply suffer for a period of time with a terminal illness, that was a catalyst for me injecting myself into health and fitness, because I was like...
You said you started 9 years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, when you just watch the soul and the life of somebody just literally exit their body and then go from being your pillar of strength, a big, tough man who you call your dad, to literally a bag of bones, a skeleton, you can't like ever turn a blind eye to that. And so
it's haunting.
Yeah, so for me, the realization of, firstly, the fragility of life in that experience, but then also how important it is to take care of your health.
Yeah.
And death comes in all different formats. I lost my dad to a terminal illness, and for a lot of people, you can walk out that door and something tragic happens, but that's why my view on life is that, hey, we've got one shot, and again, going back to the cliche sayings, but it is as cliche as this. We literally have one chance to live life in the fullest, most vibrant way possible.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many people die now, and I've said goodbye forever to enough people for me to be like, all right, well, I'm not fucking around here. I'm going to do this. I'm doing it properly. And
I'm going to try and make sure that other people come for the ride.
Exactly.
Yeah, and aren't asleep at the wheel. That's awesome.
That's
Thank you.
beautiful. Thanks.
Yeah, great share.
Great question.
Great question. And I know my father's health has certainly been a part of events, but if I look at the biggest one, it's a death of some description, but it was divorce.
Right, so the death of your marriage.
Death of the marriage.
Yeah. In what way did that sort of trigger a change in you or your life?
Ultimately, you come out of a situation like that, and after you blame and don't take accountability for the part that you played in it, you don't feel any better, you suddenly look at yourself in the mirror. And meditation started for me very soon after my divorce, because I was...
How'd you get into it?
Well, because I was numbing myself through training and that addictive thing, and that wasn't working.
Yeah.
I was having a lot of... But, you know, emotions are energy in motion. They need to move somehow.
Correct.
So the training wasn't shifting the repressive, nature and suppression of thoughts and conversations that were under the rug, and that rug was becoming very hard to walk on.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Oh, shit.
Loved that.
Yeah, I like that.
Thanks, guys. And so I would have panic attacks and, very stressed, very anxious, and I'm not a particularly anxious person now. Like, I don't. So I, as many people do, entered into meditation to look into that first layer, which was, why am I so stressed? Why am I not relaxed? Will this calm me? But as you delve deeper into meditation, it becomes less about just that first layer, which is always a layer that you're always dealing with that part of you.
It's outcome based again, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to be not stressed. Okay, we'll do this. 20 minutes, twice a day, and then I'll be like, and you start moving into deeper layers of awareness and consciousness, and start to look at your own suffering and your relationship with your suffering. And then at some point you look into the mirror of that suffering and you realize the part you played in that suffering.
Yeah.
And I really looked at that and went, I am at least, probably far more than 50% responsible for why this relationship ended.
Isn't that such a powerful realization? I think
Huge.
it's a maturation point in the human brain where you go,
it was my bullying. It was
not,
my controlling.
Yeah.
It was my needing it my way or the highway. It was my inability to see my partner like my ex-partner the way we see a tree. To quote Ram Dass, you go out into the woods or forest and you see a eucalyptus or you see, an elm or you see some ferns and you don't go, oh, geez, that one should be more like that or that should be, that should be less crooked. You just accept that this one got more light or this one didn't get more light, this one's got more rain on it, whatever, and they are all different in their ways, and that's their beauty. Yeah. But when we meet people or we meet ourselves, we just judge. We just go, you need to be more like this, you need to be. And I wanted her to be the version I needed her to be in my own expectations. But really, it was me needing to be a version of myself in my own expectations.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest event in my life because it led me down a path of taking responsibility.
Yeah. Reflection again. Also, thanks for sharing, and that's so powerful. Yeah. Conscious, everything's so interconnected with this conversation. But
well, we can't enter into the topic of health and fitness without into the topic of mental health, and it's impossible. We're not a series of
and spiritual to a good degree as well.
Yeah, we're just not a sum of parts.
It just makes you realize that no matter what, every human being that exists on this planet is going to face different adversities, whether it be the death of a relationship, the death of a person. Yeah. There's so much that we could go on all day about that kind of list. But ultimately, it's the way that you overcome them and journey through that process. And you'll come out the other side of these massive life happenings a better person if you can step back, zoom out and be reflective and go, what could I have done better here? How can I move forward? And I think that is really so important because most people in my circles, I would say, are like that, but a lot of people also aren't. There are a lot of people that are afraid to face the reality of a situation like that and acknowledge that, hey, I'm actually at fault here. A lot of people don't like to take onus.
Yeah, what part have I played in my own suffering? And often it's a lot, and people don't like to hear that.
Yeah.
And confrontation, I think, is something that we're terrible at in our culture. And there is no resolution without the confrontation. So, it's something that we really need to learn how to get back to a point where we can have a conversation with somebody who has a different ideology and it be okay. Or stand up for and give and have boundaries that I adhere to and that other people need to stick to as well, because that's quite freeing. Like, we're talking about sort of being conscious and aware and resolute. I think one of the mechanisms in order to be able to do that is to be able to sort of diarize and journal and step back and theorize your life more, document it, so that you have this discipline, which in a sense gives you freedom. Because I think these conversations are awesome, but for anyone listening that doesn't understand like how to get to a point that we're talking about, like that is, for me, it's discipline. It's understanding that if I plan to do X, Y, and Z, and I stick to my plan, it actually gives me freedom to explore everything 100%. Else.
And there's this topic that goes around a lot of them. It's the 2022, 3, 4 version of mindfulness, self-love. It's, for me, self-love has got not as much to do with getting into an infrared sauna and an ice bath and having a bougie, cocktail with the girls or the guys. It's discipline.
Yeah. Because it's giving self-love to you tomorrow.
Exactly.
It's not giving self-love and gratification,
that right
instant
now.
Gratification. It's delayed gratification.
Which is what this generation struggles with.
Well, because it's it's all the mechanisms that they're set up for. Like, from parenting to social media, like everything's giving them that instant gratification, and they get it right now and instantly. And we've been trying to teach our kids that exact thing. Like, do you want 1 lolly now, or I'll give you 5 lollies at the end of the day? Trying to teach that delayed gratification experience in life, because that actually is where the money is. What can I do that will benefit me tomorrow?
And that actually also probably is where the money is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. What can I do now that can benefit me tomorrow?
Yeah.
That's
it's such a powerful mantra.
That's such a powerful mantra.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be huge, right? It's just like, if I cook a meal, I'll cook enough for me tomorrow, right? And like tomorrow's Duncan's going to look back and go, nice.
Yeah. Oh, it's so
Glad
good.
you did that.
It's so good when future you is just so grateful for previous you.
Because I think that one of the disassociations in the human experience is that people look back and are unforgiving on what they did in the past.
Yeah.
I ate too much. I was lazy yesterday, right? Like that's where self-loathing is built. And if you want to get away from self-loathing and get towards an actualization of self-love, you have to commit to yourself and then prove time and time again that you're committed to yourself, because then your word is your bond and you've achieved that. If I go in and I do 8 reps when I was supposed to do 10, I broke that value set, right? Like I was, I didn't get any food organized. So now I have to just on the fly go and get some Uber Eats or pick up something that I know is not good for me. And then my future self is going to look back and go, well, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah. And it's like what you were talking about. It's funny that you use that exact example, because I'm going through a little bit of that at the moment. And it's almost like what you talked about with your training obsession and addiction. And then if you fell off that bandwagon, then you're like, oh, well, I'm off it now. Fuck it. And I'm a little bit in that loop at the moment. And again, just going back to being actually human. The reality of like my work over the last month of the footy season, September, has been that my routine has been so out of whack. I work early mornings, late nights. So my preparation in terms of food is very limited at the moment. And I'm finding myself eating out a lot, ordering Uber Eats for lunch if I'm working at home because I have no food in the fridge, which I'm so grateful and I'm very privileged that I have access to those kind of things. But then I beat myself up because I'm like, fuck, just go to Coles, get the food, prepare it, and then it's done. But now I've got myself in a loop because that's been my routine for the last, say, 4 or 5 weeks. But then you go down that guilt path and it's just a vicious cycle. So it's funny that you use that as an example. And I know what I need to do to get out of that.
That's the powerful part, but that's the bit that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Well, discipline always beats motivation.
Yeah.
Oh, every time.
100%.
Motivation's so fleeting.
So fleeting. But perfectionism can destroy it all. And I think that's the thing when we have such high expectations of ourselves. Even if we're disciplined, if we have such high expectations, because I'm a fairly disciplined human, but I've caught in that trap of perfectionism where you don't meet your own expectations. And when you don't meet your own expectations, then you just say, fuck it, or you get self-loathing, or you feel guilty, or you feel shame, or whatever. There's a big dance between, perfectionism and discipline. And also what ends up happening is a bit of imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I think.
But it gets back to that point about showing up for yourself and not breaking your word to yourself, right? Like if I say I'm going to work out Monday, Tuesday, Friday, or I'm going to prepare these meals so that I get there, and then I don't do it, like I've broken that bond to myself. Self-loathing comes in, and it spirals out of control.
But you can have the alternative, which is I said I was going to train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was going to cook meals on those days and prep some stuff for the week. And this came up. And this hurdle came up. And this great little job opportunity came up that ended up being 2 days' work. And I went with that.
Yeah.
And I went out and decided to get a poke bowl and sushi. And what was similar to what I was going to meal prep that I could get out, I got, a Mexican bowl or whatever. And I tried to make some good choices. They weren't be exactly as good, but they were pretty good choices. And am I a perfect human who can just do it all? No. Am I a totally imperfect human who can work within a framework within the knowledge that I have to make good choices? And can I be compassionate towards myself and just go, hey, mate, not this week.
Yeah. And that's totally okay.
It's okay.
As well.
Rather than the version of myself I was before. Fuck up. Let's just crash and burn.
Yeah.
And that's self-loathing, and that's not self-love. Compassion and just holding yourself with some grace and just going, you know what?
Yeah.
Life's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know what? But life's also awesome because I'm getting these opportunities that I didn't like. Just
exactly.
It's all good. Hey guys, I want to close on one last question. This path you've chosen on health and fitness, which is really clearly a path of consciousness and awareness and a path of purpose and the impact you can have on others. How do you, sort of close, feel like this path, this beautiful path that you've chosen, has given your lives a greater sense of meaning?
For me, it comes back to I'm so grateful for this path, this area, this space that I work in wellbeing, because not only does it help me to feel better about myself, I'm a better human when I'm focused on taking care of my 5 cups, mental, spiritual, physical, all those things. But because I know that gives me so much fulfillment when I see other people and what it brings into my life. Like I said before, I have built the most deep and loving connections with people through working in this space, and connection, community, and wellness is just who I am. It's my identity. And so it's given me life in that actually my life is better because I'm healthier and I'm fit and I care about my well-being. But in fact, it's also given me all of the connections, not all, there's lots of other ways that I've met people out there as well, but really it's given me community. It's given me a sense of belonging. And that's what massive for me.
How incredible that from death came life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How profound.
How profound.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I know you asked the question, but I was listening to Meg's and I've got no idea what it is. What was the
God, I love you. I said, what is the path you've chosen?
Yes.
How has it given your life a greater sense of meaning?
I mean, you can almost split my life into 2, and they coincide with when I met my wife. I actually had already made the decision.
I mean the path of health and fitness.
I know.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm getting there. When I trained to become a personal trainer, I'd already made that decision, and in that time I met my now wife. But there was the time before that point where I think I was a boy, and then there's that time after. And since that time, there isn't much separation between who I am and what I do. Like it's everything for me. In that I'm so lucky to have found this work, because as an accountant, you learn what you learn in order to do it at work. And there's very few times that you actually get to use that skill set in any other setting. But it's all day, every day for me. And I've never had a subject that I've wanted to study until I found health and wellness. And now I can consume all the information on it. I still like to drop into the odd fiction book every now and then because my brain does get a bit fried with it. But yeah, no, I can't sort of individualize it. It encompases everything for me and for my family. Yeah, it fills everything up for me. So it's been a ride.
Awesome. Guys, I said at the start, you're 2 epic humans. I think this chat upholds that statement pretty damn well. Thank you so much, Megsy and Dunk, for coming on and taking off your masks and sharing some really beautiful stuff and big stuff about your own journeys, but for giving people a slice of incredible wisdom when it comes to the health and fitness space. Thank you so much.
Mate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for facilitating such important chat.
And a great conversation.